So please welcome to the stage Carter Smith, Morgan Saylor, Noah Silver, Darren Lew, and producer Alex Orlovsky. So now Darren just won an award at the MTV Music Awards last night for Best Cinematography for Beyonce's music video, Pretty Hurts. Congratulations. So I guess my first question will go to you, Carter. You were at Sundance with this film this year in the main competition, the narrative competition. And the last time you were there, you made huge waves. I think it was in 2006 with your first short film, Bug Rush, which won the jury award. Now, in between those two films, you went from making, an indie short to making a huge DreamWorks-funded horror movie,
yes,
The Ruins.
Very different world.
Very different world. Now you're back in indie land. What brought you back to the indie side of things?
I fell in love with the story that the film is based on. I read the book, fell in love with it. I knew I wanted to do something that was smaller in scale, that I could work, that I could develop with, from scratch. And, I read the book and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I spent about a year adapting it. And I wanted to do something small that I thought would be sort of easy to get up and get made.
I'm curious.
That wasn't necessarily the case, but that was the intention.
And we're going to get to the film ahead, but what was it like going from, making a short indie film to working on a DreamWorks film? Did you find the experience to be a little overwhelming, or did you totally embrace it and kind of get with that type of filmmaking?
It wasn't as intimidating as I thought it would be, at the time. I definitely, on The Ruins, I did meetings on that film for like a year trying to get the job. I would go in for a meeting, go in for another meeting, over and over and over. So, but I never, in a million years, thought that they would actually hire me for it. And so, by the time that they actually did, I had sort of written it off and didn't have any expectations. The difference is you just have more money, have more days to shoot, have more resources, but the actual process was almost exactly the same. I felt like.
Making this film, or is?
Well, yeah. Sort of assembling the team, surrounding yourself with creative people that sort of understand your vision, and casting and the production design and the cinematography. All of that felt very much the same, strangely.
Yeah. And about surrounding yourself with a team, how did you come up with the cast for this film? Everyone's just so unique in what they bring to the project.
It was a long process. It was one of those things where Noah had actually read a very early version of the script and put himself on tape. How long ago was that? Like 3 years ago or something. And he put himself on tape as both of the lead characters. And, and all through the process, he was the very first person that I ever saw saying the lines, for both Adam and Jaimie. So it's kind of interesting that it ended up coming all the way back around to the beginning. But, you just see actors that people put themselves on tape. But I think that all of them, seeing them read, it was very clear that they, belonged in those parts. And,
And what part did you want more? Were you happy with the one you got, or?
No, I was very much so. Yeah, I think in the end it did. I think both parts were interesting for different reasons. But in the end, I think it did feel right to play Jaimie, in my opinion, for me. And Cameron's so good at Adam as Adam. I couldn't see it any other different way. So Carter did the right choice.
And with the two of them too, it's so important how they are together. So Noah as Jaimie wouldn't have worked with so many of the Adams, that were part of the process. It was about finding that match.
Now, everyone here has seen a lot of ghosts on screen, various incarnations, and yours is such a unique one. I've never seen such a shy, timid, and lovable yet mysterious one. How did you go about, approaching playing a ghost?
For me, the ghost aspect of it all gave him the courage to actually come up to Adam, because he'd always looked up to Adam and always wanted to have a friendship with that person. And I think when you become invisible and when you get to choose who sees you and who you want to connect with, it kind of gives you that strength and power and control to take the extra step and do something that you wouldn't normally do.
Now, I know that you pursued the part, but I want to know how you all, what you all like made of the script when you first read it, because what I love about the film is that it's so hard to classify. It's not a ghost story. It's not just a coming-of-age film. It's not just a film about sexuality. It covers so many grounds. What did you both make of it when you first read it? Did you get a firm handle on what it was about?
I like that it felt like a really honest portrayal of teenagers, and it wasn't like some commercialized version of what being a teenager is like and what going to high school is like. And it was weird and cool and different than a lot of the things I was reading at the time, and really stuck out. And exactly like Carter said, after you read the script, it kind of sits with you, and you think about it the next day and think about it the next day. And it just seemed like an interesting story to tell and be a part of. And Gracie seemed really fun too.
When I read the script, I read it I read many different versions of it.
Version that was probably really bad.
And there was, I remember telling Carter, I liked the script from the beginning, but there was this one version you wrote where it kind of just had this like sixth dimension where you could really see and picture and feel the world that he created, and you could really picture it in your mind, and I could see these people moving and talking to each other, and it was just such an easy read. Like you didn't even think that you were reading a script. It almost felt like you were already watching it happen. So it's pretty special. Carter nailed it. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to watch the first clip from the film. Now, Noah, you're naked a lot in this movie. Well, not necessarily naked, but in your underwear a bunch.
Tidy whities.
Tidy whities.
We came very close.
Yeah. It looks cold, you know? Were you freezing? Were you guys shooting on a soundstage? Were you guys actually on location in the winter?
No.
How did you survive? Barely?
No, I was outside upstate New York, February.
January, February, it was freezing.
Sometimes at night.
Freezing cold.
Yeah, it was cold. It was cold.
How did you get through it? How did you make sure this guy didn't die of hypothermia while
We
while
tried
shooting?
to treat him well. We tried to have blankets and,
Well, the thing is, I had full body makeup too, so I couldn't necessarily put something on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had to go
That
sort
would
of
really
very
cover.
lightly over so it didn't mess up his makeup.
Yeah.
It was not comfortable for him.
It
I mean,
was
for
funny, though.
anyone, but he had the worst of it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Poor guy. About the makeup that went into creating Jaimie Marks, you could have gone at it from so many different methods. What made you go with that kind of? It's really not. It's subtle. The approach you took to the makeup.
I mean, the whole idea with the ghost in general always was that I didn't want him to be some sort of transparent ghost that walks through doors and has magical powers. Really, I wanted him, to actually be sitting next to Adam, or for him to really be physically present there. So it was a choice early on that he would there wouldn't be any special effects. So it just became about like color palette and figuring out like what color we wanted him. And Mike Potter is an amazing makeup designer who worked on the film. We just tweaked it, and there was a lot of testing involved. Because Cameron is
white.
is really pale, and so no matter what we did to Noah was always sort of showing up as tan, which we did not want. So it involved a little bit more than we had planned on, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Now, are there any special effects in the film whatsoever, or
A couple, but not that many, right? I mean, not to do with special effects. I mean, there are times when, we like like took out a boom that dropped, so things like that, but not real like special effects.
Yeah, well, the reason I bring it up is because Darren's cinematography is so evocative. You always have a feeling that there's something lurking out of the frame, another ghost, another entity, another shadow. What was your approach to creating this world? It's so distinct in the film.
Well, I worked a number of times with Carter, so even though I think Carter and I watch different kinds of movies. I mean, Carter will often bring up a film that I've never heard of, never seen. Carter would show me a lot of things that would describe the kind of feeling you would want in this film in particular. I mean, I've worked with Carter before, so I understand what kind of palette he likes, and what kind of subtlety he likes, and what kind of mystery he likes. So I have to tell you, it was pretty easy because I think I already know what Carter is looking for. We referenced a number of films. I mean, I showed him some things that I really liked. He showed me a number of things he liked, but there wasn't much of it. It wasn't until we really just sat down at his dining room table and really started to map out the film after having seen the location that we kind of made the film and understood where the angles were. I mean, maybe there were a couple times when we were caught off guard and something didn't really work the way we thought it would, but I would say that we had a pretty good idea all the time, I think, of how we wanted to shoot it.
And a lot of it was also about, like, because there's a lot that happens in darkness, and so a lot of it was like, how dark is too dark, how dark is dark enough. He would constantly be showing me clips like, is this too dark? Is that too dark? Can we be this dark? Yeah. So it was sort of like, okay, figuring out like what the level of darkness was going to be.
Mm-hmm. And there were times when I'd say, Carter, we really don't see anything in here. Should I put anything up? And Carter'd say, no, leave it.
And we ended up seeing stuff.
And we ended up seeing stuff.
We have one more clip from the film to show. Now, Carter, it's clear from that scene that you have a really great approach with actors. I mean, you managed to elicit some great performance, and you worked with a young cast on The Ruins, and you worked with the young cast on this film. What is your approach? How do you go about directing your cast?
I feel like if you cast the film right, if you put the right actors in the parts, then they do all the heavy lifting, like that scene in particular. I mean, we didn't shoot it in chunks and pieces, and it's like a 4-page scene, so it's like 4.5 minutes of dialogue, and we would shoot it from beginning to end without stopping, and every single time Cameron and Noah would just amaze me with something different. So I mean, my approach is kind of hopefully to let them do what they do best, and gently nudge them towards where I want them to be if it doesn't quite align. Did
you both feel totally free on set to explore and do whatever you wanted?
Yeah. As we worked through it, we of course rehearsed the scenes before we shot each scene, and kind of spoke about it a little, especially the bigger ones, and where it should go. But then, it felt like Carter was trusting enough to let it organically just unfold.
And I feel like we spent probably more time before we actually started shooting, talking one-on-one about the characters, and less time actually rehearsing the scene. Yeah. Like it was more about like having the conversation beforehand about who this girl or boy was or is,
Now, this is obviously an independent production. Was it tough to get funding for this film, given what we were talking about earlier about, how it isn't really classifiable? It's not your average coming-of-age story. Like, how did you sell this to producers?
Well, I mean, luckily Alex on the end is a producer that I had worked with before developing something, and he was the first person that I sent the script to.
Yeah.
So I sort of knew that our sensibilities were aligned, and I just trusted that he was going to be able to help me make this weird little movie that doesn't fit into, like it would have been a lot easier to make if it was like a straight up horror movie, but it never. I mean, the book wasn't that, and that was sort of forcing it to be something that it wasn't. But it made it more difficult.
I saw Bug Crush at Sundance in 2006, just having no expectations, just wandered into a shorts program. And anyone out there who hasn't seen Bug Crush, you could go see it. You should go see it. It's really, I mean, one of the best shorts, of the last 10 years, if not, longer. But I saw that and was just like, this guy's so talented, wanted to work with him, and fortunately had that opportunity a couple years later. And then, yeah, with this one, it was hard. But I think it's like I've learned to always just sort of trust filmmakers, and whenever people were on the fence about this movie, it was like educate them on Carter, make sure that they saw his work. I think that we were really careful in who we cast. I think that's one of the hard things about getting a film like this made, is it starred young actors, and Carter wanted them to be authentically aged, so we weren't 26-year-olds weren't an option. Like, how old were you guys when we did this?
18.
They were all 18, actually.
Yeah.
Luckily.
So it was a long process finding people who believed in the project. Omri Bezalel, another one of our producers, is here. So he was someone who believed in it, and it was really challenging. But I think also Carter had a clear vision, and when we talked about what would happen if at the end, like, Jaimie actually suddenly went dark and killed people and did this and that, and he was very specific that that's not who the character was, and we were all happy to support him in that. So, but it was one of the hardest movies I've ever put together.
Now, Alex isn't the only one to share that viewpoint on, Bug Rush being one of the best shorts I've ever played at Sundance. I mean, people were psyched to see this movie. Like, the energy in the room, I remember it was so palpable at Sundance, and when Trevor introduced you, he's just so proud of you, such a fan of your work. Given that you've only been there once before with a short, can you talk about the kind of pressure you felt in following that initial win up with anything going forward, and how do you manage those kind of expectations that were no doubt placed upon you?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's nerve-wracking, for sure. I mean, I think the easiest thing is to try to have no expectations, and then everyone that likes the movie is like, is great. But I mean, one of the things that we were working on finishing it, doing the sound mix, doing the score, right up until the last minute. And so I feel like that, it kept us so busy that we didn't have time to sort of stress out too much about, what might or might not happen. But as you know, like at Sundance, the audiences there are just so excited to see the films, and so just to finally have it in front of a real audience was just so incredibly liberating. But no expectations was definitely the way to go for me.
Awesome. We have one last clip, I lied earlier, of the film, and then we're going to open it up to the audience.
Why did you do it?
Go ahead and raise your hand. We'll bring you the mic.
This being adapted from a book, as actors, as the director, cinematographer, producer, what is the process or challenges that you that you had to overcome or go through in order to bring this story to life?
Well, I mean, in adapting it, the biggest challenge was to keep, what I loved about the book in the movie, because I mean, a book you can, you spend so much time inside the characters' heads and, sort of going off on tangents, but, figuring out what was the sort of the essence of what I loved about the book, and then, staying true to that was the most challenging. And I think that, one of the things was once I kind of figured out that it was Adam and Jaimie and Gracie and that triangle that sort of fascinated me, once it became all about that, it sort of clicked in a way that it hadn't before. When I was trying to like shove everything that was in the book into the script, and it was just messy and it wasn't working. And only once that triangle kind of became the center is when it really started to feel real.
Christopher I think he was really trusting throughout the process in terms of just giving the book to Carter and really saying, here, you do this. And that always is very nerve-wracking. And when he actually saw the film for the first time and really like loved it and was supportive, that was a real that really made us feel good. Because although, as Carter said, there were certain things we had to sort of carve away and simplify in order to to make it work as a film, the heart of the book, I think, remained intact.
Yeah, and I mean, there's stuff that's in the movie that is not from the book. That's that's just in the film. And the book is actually it's called One for Sorrow by Christopher Barzak, and it's a beautiful, beautiful novel.
Convincing the agent to let us renew the option 6 times, not always so easy. But fortunately, he's stuck with us too.
But this is an increasingly rare situation where you have a producer who's supportive of the creative process and a director who's willing to take chances. I mean, sometimes Carter would literally let me turn the camera on the side because we thought the scene would maybe look better that way. And I mean, I'm someone who creates moving images for popular consumption, but I really feel that a place to do interesting things that are cross-genre, things that really don't fit in categories to, I don't know, and they're not just indulgent activities, but I really believe that we try to tell a story in a new and fresh way. That arena is disappearing, with television. But I mean, between producers like Omri or editors like Eric, I mean, it's one of the few opportunities that are left to really take those chances. And I can tell you, it's those chances that influence a lot of the things that we'll hopefully see for a while that we're seeing now. And I'm just worried about the disappearance of that opportunity for people.
Also, talking about the book, I'm kind of curious how you came across it, how you found it. If you could talk briefly about the early stages of multiple options, and also if you think you'll do more adaptations, or if you.
Yeah, I mean, I just read it. I just picked it up in a bookstore and read it, and I wasn't looking for something to adapt or a film. I was just reading it as a as a reader, and fell in love with it. And eventually, like sort of 6 months later, when I couldn't stop thinking about it, I was like, let's just check and see if that's available. And then it was available, and you sort of option it for X number of months, and then you have to re-option, and then sort of until you make the film, you sort of have to keep.
How long ago did you read it for the first time?
I mean, at this point, probably 5 years ago, I guess. And then I waited about 6 months, and then took about a year to do the adaptation. But it's like this ticking clock because you have this number of months, and you have to get the film put together and financed and made before the option expires. So it's a little stressful. I mean, it sounds like when you first option it and you think, I've got 18 months, and then it goes like away so quickly.
Hi. I was wondering why pick the name Jaimie Marks is Dead for the title. Like, what other names were in contention and what went around with the process of picking that exactly? I mean, it's a good name. It like sticks out and catches your attention, but.
Well, I mean, the book was called One for Sorrow, and that's from a nursery rhyme that played a big part in the book. But after we sort of got further in, I realized that nursery rhyme was not going to play a part in the film, and I kept trying to force that nursery rhyme in there, and it just wasn't working. And so once I tried to sort of think of other names. I mean, one of the in the first part of the book as well as the film, I mean, Jaimie Marks is this kid that no one really knew him when he was alive, and as an audience, we don't really ever get to see him when he's alive either. And it's one of those.
Just one scene.
Yeah, but it's sort of like I liked the idea that everybody was talking about Jaimie Marks and that the fact that he was dead, but no one really. That didn't really mean anything to anyone other than that it was something to talk about, and that the phrase Jaimie Marks is dead was probably his name was said more in the weeks after he died than it had been in his entire school life. And luckily Christopher Barzak approved the title change.
Did you write the script and then go looking for financing, or do both at the same time?
Yeah, I waited until I wrote the script and then gave it to Alex, and then we worked on it together and sort of shaped it a little bit. and and got it into a good place before we you only get that chance to make the first impression with financiers and people once, and so you want to make sure it's in as good a shape as possible before anyone reads it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very, very rare that you send something out once and immediately people say yes. You're always going to get 50 no's, but all you need is one yes, and sometimes that takes 3 months, sometimes it takes 2 years. It's just about also understanding when you are just hearing no's, being able to ask why are people saying no and figuring out how to address that. And that was where we did sort of clarify and simplify the story. And I think in the process of having people respond to it, you always have to evolve and make something better or sort of more, it's just like find the way to get to yes.
And with that, this talk unfortunately comes to an end. The film's available to download on iTunes on August 29th, and it's also opening in theaters this Friday. So thank you, everyone, for coming today.
As intimidating as I thought it would be, at the time. I mean, I definitely, on the Ruins, I did meetings on that film for like a year trying to get the job. I would go in for a meeting, go in for another meeting, over and over and over. So, but I never, in a million years, thought that they would actually hire me for it. And so, by the time that they actually did, I had sort of written it off and didn't have any expectations. I mean, the difference is you just have more money, have more days to shoot, have more resources, but.
So please welcome to the stage Carter Smith, Morgan Saylor, Noah Silver, Darren Lew, and producer Alex Orlovsky. So now Darren just won an award at the MTV Music Awards last night for Best Cinematography for Beyonce's music video, Pretty Hurts. Congratulations. So I guess my first question will go to you, Carter. You were at Sundance with this film this year in the main competition, the narrative competition. And the last time you were there, you made huge waves. I think it was in 2006 with your first short film, Bug Rush, which won the jury award. Now, in between those two films, you went from making, an indie short to making a huge DreamWorks-funded horror movie,
yes,
The Ruins.
Very different world.
Very different world. Now you're back in indie land. What brought you back to the indie side of things?
I fell in love with the story that the film is based on. I read the book. Fell in love with it. I knew I wanted to do something that was smaller in scale, that I could work, that I could develop with, from scratch. And, I read the book and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I spent about a year adapting it. And I wanted to do something small that I thought would be sort of easy to get up and get made.
I'm curious.
That wasn't necessarily the case, but it was that was the intention.
And we're going to get to the film at hand, but what was it like going from, I don't know, making a short indie film to working on a DreamWorks film? Did you find the experience to be a little overwhelming, or did you totally embrace it and kind of get with that type of filmmaking?
It wasn't. The actual process was almost exactly the same. I felt like.
Making this film, or is?
Well, yeah. Sort of assembling the team, surrounding yourself with creative people that sort of understand your vision, and casting and the production design and the cinematography. All of that felt very much the same, strangely.
Yeah. And about surrounding yourself with a team, how did you come up with the cast for this film? Everyone's just so unique in what they bring to the project.
It was a long process. It was one of those things where Noah